Hi there and welcome back to this part of the course. Let's continue. In the previous session or the previous lesson, we concepted the rest of the castle, doing a rough drawing like that. And in this lesson, we will continue working on this. What we want to do now is we want to create the assets for each part. For instance, the tower, the round tower, the wall width, the gate, and that sort of thing. So let's jump into it. I'm going to start with one of the towers. I've got a layer here set to 50%, so we can actually make it 50%. Let's call that 50%, so that it makes it easier to draw and work on this layer. Right, so for the round tower, let me first get a grid. Now that we have the grid in place, I think let's start off with a brick wall again. I'm not sure what happened to my brick wall that I've created, but luckily this is an easy thing to create. So I'm just going to create a new brick like so. Add a solid fill layer, make it a brownish gray color, whatever gray brown color suits you. Let's make sure it fits the scene, so let's pick a color closer to our scene. Then I want to round off the corners. Right, so again, if you're using adjustment layers in Photoshop, if you press D on the keyboard, it will swap it out to black and white. So white reveals, and if you press X, it will delete. All right, so I'm going to pick a brush that mimics something like paint. I think I like that brush. Let's pick another brush. Let's do one of these. Just want to make sure that it doesn't do color dynamics. The other thing I want to do is just tweak the minimum diameter and transfer. Doesn't do a thing. Right, transfer is basically opacity. So if you disable that, yeah, opacity is it's a weird thing. I'm not sure what transfer do here. Maybe it's all to do with adjusting the dynamics of transparency. So yeah, let's leave it at that. I'll find out more for us about the transfer. So black and white, black removes and white adds. So I just want to round off the corners a little bit, make it irregular, like a real stone brick or stones would look like. Something like that. Right, and then I'm going to duplicate that, make it slightly lighter. Control A, make sure that you've got black in the background, delete, and then just add the highlights in your brick. Like so. So I'm just going to create one brick, and then we'll play around with this brick. Okay, some randomness in the brick's texture. Press X again to erase, and then I want to make the highlights stronger again, especially where the brick is a bit uneven. So duplicate the let's call this brick base, brick base. Let's call that brick shadow, and spelling shadow, and let's call that brick mid-tone because we still want to add highlights. So brick shadow, I'm just gonna make that darker and delete, and then add your shadows, increase the opacity, so what we want to do is we want to imagine that the light is coming from the top, that we've got strong highlights at the top and the edges, and wherever there's a raise in the brick's texture, those edges will catch some light. So add some highlights in there as well. So right, so just want to make the shadows a little bit stronger. Right, duplicate the midtone. Let's call it bricks highlights. And let's brighten it up, add a bit more warmth to that. Okay, and while we have that selected, press delete on the keyboard. Remember, we've still got our black and white, so if I've got the white in the background and I press delete, it's going to fill it with my adjustment layer, with my solid color layer. If I have the black in the background and press delete, it will delete it, it will remove it. So now I would just want to highlight the strongest areas of my brick. I don't want to highlight everything. Okay, I'm just going to use the smudge tool to get rid of some aspects of the harshness or the painted look. So we want to make it look painterly, but we just want to make it less obvious. So let's have a look. That looks fine. Right, and then I want to add some detail on top of that. So I'm going to duplicate the shadow layer, put it at the top of this, Control A to delete. Make sure that you've got the brick base selected. I'm going to darken this slightly. And I just want to add a few marks and cracks and blemishes in my brick. Don't add too much in this for now, because we want to duplicate this brick and we don't want to have too many similar features in all of the bricks. You'll see what I mean. Just let me quickly finish this. Merge all of that together. So we've got one brick, and we can duplicate that brick now. Press Ctrl T to flip it horizontally so that we have an altered version of it, and we can rotate it even. But now you will have to reverse the highlights and the shadows on this brick. Also, a good thing to do now is create some variation. So remove some of the marks that you've created and add new marks that's slightly different to the marks in this one. so now that we've got 2 bricks, let's merge them together. Duplicate those 2 bricks, duplicate those bricks, put it at the top, and now we want to move it over so that it is offset. And again, we want to get rid of some of the repeating elements. So we want to get rid of that. And then we duplicate that again. Move it over, and by now you should know what's going to happen next and next and next. We've got quite a few bricks going for us at the moment. We still need to just create a little bit more variation in here. So I just want to remove some of the repeating patterns. For instance, that as well. Just make it lighter. You don't need to remove it entirely. Right, so that's a quick way to get a whole bucket load of bricks together. Then now we just duplicate that and create a whole pattern from this. Okay, and we can make this smaller again, like so. And then Control J, V, move it down. And you can see how quickly we've created a brick texture. Okay, so if we duplicate that, it will fit seamlessly into that, but I don't want to do that at the moment. What we want to do now is we want to create variation in color and value. So for now, I'm going to use my lasso tool and select a few bricks. I'm just going to do a few rough ones, and then I'll do a time lapse for the rest. So a rough selection like that, and then what you create a right. So for this, then create a hue saturation adjustment layer. You can adjust the saturation of that. You can adjust the value, make it slightly darker or lighter, and the hue as well. So I want to go for a more of let's leave the lightness at 0, and I want a more of a reddish kind of brick, not too red. Bump it up all the way until you've got a color that you want, and then just bring it down where it's just barely visible. Right, so if you flick it on and off, you'll see that you've got color variation. So I'm going to select a few more and then just invert the selection. Right, let me quickly show you. If I make a selection like that and I press Control I on the keyboard, I invert the mask so that the white reveals and the black hides my adjustment layer. So let me continue. Create a new hue saturation. This time I'm just going to change the color to something slightly more yellowish hue. I'm going to push up the hue all the way and just drag it until it's almost a yellowy color, and then bring the saturation down again to something like that. Then press Control I to invert the selection, and now it's just grabbing another set of bricks and adding that yellow tint to it by Control I. Okay, so you'll see that this brick here has got that yellow tint to it. Let's continue. I think that yellow is just a bit too yellow, so I just want to bring it back towards the red color, just so ever so slightly. I think about there. So without and with the yellow tint, without and with the red tint, gives it a lot of variation. But I still think we can change the values of the bricks. So I'm going to add another levels layer. This time I'm going to push it towards the dark side. Just a little bit, not too much. So you'll see that we've got a jump in value. Select the mask, Control I to invert the mask, and then it's just a matter of selecting a few bricks again to alter the value of those set bricks. And you'll see that we now have variation. I just want to add a few darker bricks in here as well. I think that should be fine. Okay, we can still tweak the values. If it's a bit too harsh, just dial it down. Okay, I think that looks okay. Right, and then we want to do the reverse of that by adding another levels layer. This time we push it more towards the lighter tone. And once you have done that, you will see that sometimes the color variations that you've added might be a bit too strong. So I just want to pull back on the yellow, and I also want to do that on the red. So the color variation is still visible, but it's a little bit more subtle. And then light and dark variation also adds to the whole effect. Now we can select that whole group and merge it together as a bricks layer. We still need to do the grout, so I'm gonna duplicate. Let's duplicate that. Let's save that and call it brick space. Duplicate it again. I'm going to put the brick space at the bottom so that we have that in the back whenever we need to grab that again. So now I'm going to use my bricks. Let's call it brick wall. I'm going to use Control T to scale it down just a little bit more. Control J to move it over. And merge that. Bring that up. So duplicate that again and merge that. So now we've got a big tile we can use for whatever we want. So let's call that brick wall tile. So now we've got this tower we want to create. We've got this brick tile. Let's duplicate that. disable the one below it, and let's call this brick tile round tower. Bring it down to the tower, and we can still make it smaller. So Control T, make it smaller. Maybe a tad bigger, like so. Right. Let's put the bricks aside for the moment. Now we want to create the base for our tower, our round tower. So we want to use our grid. And I'm going to use, you can draw, all right, so let me quickly demonstrate how to do this. So when you want to create cylinders, you will need to create a framework to be able to work or create your cylinder. So what we will do is we usually draw a square like that. Then we divide the square in halves and use those halves as well. Right, then we divide this in thirds, that into thirds, more or less. And then we work from that point towards that mark that we've made to draw our circle, or oval in this case. Like so. And then we can duplicate that, bring it up. And then we can use this to draw our cylinder. I got that. We can also duplicate that and continue in this fashion. But I've created a device that will make this all much easier and quicker to draw. So let me show you this device. So if you haven't watched or have seen my video about the drawing device, I'll add a link in the description, or maybe you'll find the link at the top right corner of the screen now. But I'm not going to dive too deep into the rotate cube device, but what it helps with is rotating objects in 3D space or in isometric space on your screen using these cubes, which makes life much easier. For now, I'm going to use this device and to create the round tower. So what I want to do is I just want to convert this to a raster layer, and I want to delete the radial devices, the radials. So what did I do? Okay, so let's activate my drawing again. And then I'm going to scale this to fit my tower more or less. Like so. Just increase it a smidge. So I want to have the blue oval fit the base of my tower, and then I'm going to duplicate that and move it up a little bit. And duplicate it again This time I want to fit it so that it's almost the same size as the top of my tower, something like that. Right, that will give me a very good basis to work on. Let's merge all of that together and let's call it Tower Guides. And I'm going to lower the opacity of that, bring it down, and maybe we can lower the opacity of that as well, so that this drawing is just a rough. And now I'm going to create a new black solid fill layer, invert the mask, and using my brush I'm gonna draw my tower. Just want a different pencil, maybe not that one, maybe this one will work. Right, so I'm gonna start with this part of the tower. Right, then I'm going to select the lower layer again and finish that circle. Now I'm going to do the same for the bottom. Right, and connect those. Right. I'm going to make a selection of that, copy that, and Control T to make it smaller, and then make it fit the top of the tower. I'm going to duplicate it again, bring it down just a little bit more, like so, and we can continue the drawing. We can make this a rough drawing. Right, and then we can add a trapdoor in here. Right, and then we need to create those shooting holes or breaks in the wall. So the best way to do that is to divide this in half and half, then divide it in half and half again. Try to follow the grid, of course. So remember, the grid is going in that and in that direction. And then the vertical and horizontal, keep that precisely vertical and horizontal. And then it's just a matter of opening the gaps, like so. Right, then another circle in there. You can follow the midpoint, so halfway from top to bottom, and do the same here. Right, and then bring it down, back, bring it down to the back. Right, let's first erase. Maybe this is going to make it much easier. So we want the gap in there. We want the gap in there. Then back to drawing. Bring it down, bring it around, bring it down, around, down, around. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. It can be a bit random. If you want to make it really perfect, rendering this in 3D will absolutely help you in that way. But I think having some randomness, some irregularities will help the whole thing. So let's activate our brick layer again. Let's bring that brick layer over at the bottom. And now what we want to do is we want to wrap these bricks around our tower, but we don't want to use the one, we basically want to make a copy. So I'm going to make a selection slightly bigger than I intend to use. Then press Ctrl J on your keyboard. This will create that slice of the wall. Then press Ctrl T, right click it and select warp. Now here comes the magic. You can pull this down like so until it follows the shape of your tower. Bring it in, bring it in. Make sure that it wraps around your tower. Just try to follow the base of the tower. And the same at the top, so that the bricks wrap around. You might need to work a lot, move your points around a lot to get to where it wraps around your tower nicely. So don't be afraid to fiddle until it looks about right. Especially where you can see it wraps around the top and the bottom. So I'm gonna apply that and see if that works. Now on this layer, create a mask. And using the eraser tool, you should be able to erase what you don't need. Just make sure that you've got the mask selected. and not the layer itself, because if you make a mistake, it's going to be harder to paint it back. With the mask, it's easy to just swap between black and white to reveal and to hide. So X, so if it's on black, it's gonna if you've got the eraser selected, white will take away and black will reveal. If you've got the brush selected, it will do the reverse. So when it's black, it will hide, and when you've got white selected, it will reveal. So just keep in mind that eraser works the other way around, and brush tools works by painting, but so black will hide with a brush tool, but with the eraser tool, it will reveal. Don't worry about it. Just press X on the keyboard and do your test. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, just press X again to do the opposite. It's not that complicated. No, man. So let's quickly do that. Make another selection, slightly bigger than your tower. Control J, make sure that you've got the tower bricks that you've got at the base selected. And go up. Control T and warp. We are going to do the same for the top of the tower. Right, so the warp tool is can be fiddly, but it works very, very nicely. Another thing to keep in mind with the warp tool, if you take this point beyond this point, it's going to wrap around to the back. But sometimes this is not desirable. So you're going to have a hard time controlling that. So just make sure that you warp it only where you want the where you need the warp to be. So I wouldn't recommend taking it to the back. Trying to make this layer of bricks fit the base of the top of this tower. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Oh boy. Right, we're going to do the same. I'm going to use a mask layer. This time I'm going to invert the mask, and using my eraser tool, I'm going to bring back where I want the bricks to be. So we can delete our guidelines now. We don't need that anymore. And you could duplicate this again and add those to the bricks, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to merge this and this into one layer, and then I'm going to paint the rest. That's easy enough. So I didn't have to paint 100 bricks for this area, but it should be easy to paint the rest of the bricks in. So let's quickly jump into that. Right, you'll notice that we when we created the bricks, we didn't create the cement or the glue between the bricks. All we need to do now is just make a fill layer at the bottom of all of this. So I'm going to select the tower, the outside of the tower, Shift Control I to invert the selection. Select modify contract by 1 pixel so that my selection is under the lines. Then underneath my bricks drawing or painting, I'm going to add a new fill layer like that. Let's make it dark. So you'll see that you can make it light, you can make it gray, you can make it purple, you can make it blue, you can make it glow as well. So say you want glowy concrete or glowing bricks, you can do that. For my liking, I'm gonna make it black. I think that will work. I'm going to call that bricks paint, and I'm going to continue, although now I can't see my drawing, so I'm going to select the top part and delete that from this brick. Let's call this bricks cement, and I'm going to delete the parts that I don't want. I'm just gonna select that because I'm gonna paint the rest, so it should be good. Right, let's continue. I think for the floor of this tower, I'm going to use I'm going to create a wooden floor. I'm going to make a selection of that and then paint wood in here. Now wood shouldn't be that difficult to paint by now. Do you know how to paint wood? Please leave a comment in the please let me know in the comments. So if you don't, here's how you do it. Select your brush tool, make it slightly bigger, select the brown color. You know how to get to brown? Very easy. Select an orange color, so more towards the red will give you red brown, more towards the yellow will give you a yellow brown. So somewhere in the middle, if you've got a bright orange like that, you've got brown. All you need to do now is go down and to the left. Somewhere there you'll find a nice brown like that. I'm gonna make it less saturated, something like that. So for the base, you want a medium brown, something like that. Then you want to darken your tone because you want to create the grain. So just paint in the grid's direction. I'm following the grid we see in the bricks. Press X on the keyboard, select that same orangey color, make it slightly lighter and brighter, lower the opacity of your brush to about 30, and start adding more variation in your wood's texture. Okay, make the brush slightly smaller. Start with a big brush when you do this, so that you start creating the bigger textures or the bigger grain. and then make your brush slightly smaller, and with each step you can make the brush smaller and smaller, increase the opacity, and add lots of variations. Right, now we want to create individual planks. I'm going to pick a black, set my opacity to full, and very carefully draw in your planks, like so. Again, try to follow the grid. Right, and then I want a few highlights in there as well. And depending on how much branches your tree had, there will be quite a few knots in your wood. So just make it slightly darker and create the knots and the rings that goes with the knots. Now this is very fine finicky detail. For a scene as big as this, you normally wouldn't see this amount of fine detail. But there you go, that's how you do wood. And if we remember correctly, we said that we want a trapdoor in here. So I'm just going to duplicate that, Control T, make it slightly. Remember we had that selected. So remember I made a selection of that, and then I press Control H on the keyboard to hide that. So if you want to see your selection again, press H again to reveal. And now we press Control J to duplicate that. Control T to make it slightly smaller. And we could even flip it horizontally so that the trapdoor goes in a different direction. And now all we need to do is erase in this direction and erase in this direction. And you've got a trapdoor. Very quickly and easily we have created a trapdoor. And all we need to do now is just create the depth of the wood. Look at what I'm doing here instead of here. I just want to get rid of those blanks, and then I'm going to create new blanks in here. Just want 2 in there. Bring it down, and we just want to bring back some of the highlights in those individual blanks. And maybe a bit darker shadow at the bottom, or shade color. Something like that. I'm going to put it there, and what you might need to do is you might need to rework your drawing. Right, so let's merge this with the bricks paint and Control E. Now this is one solid layer again, and we can continue with the bricks. Just a note on highlights and shadows. You will see that I have not added highlights and shadows as of yet. The only highlights and shadows I add into the scene is for the bricks itself. At some point we want to flip this tower to create variation, and then if you added a shadow in here, it will ruin the effect when you flip it horizontally, and then you've got only this one version that you need to copy and paste all over the place. Whereas when you add the shadows and highlights once you have a flipped version, it will make it much easier to tweak this and create new highlights and shadows for the flip tower. So don't worry about highlights and shadows at this point. Just focus on getting the ambient colors of, or the base colors of the tower correct, and then the shadows and highlights for the bricks itself. Don't worry about the tower's highlights and shadows at the moment. Right, you'll see that I made at the back, I made each of those top nooks, it's a stone of its own. So I want to do that for this as well. So you might need to tweak this for that very same reason. So bring this up, bring that up. It's never set in stone, you know. You can always unstone it and create your own version of what needs to happen in a specific area. We still need to create color variation in here, so I'm just going to select a few stones and do the same trick we've done for the bottom wall, for the bottom part of the wall. But here it's not that vital to have too many color variations, as long as we keep it in the same style and look for what we did at the bottom. So Control U, just want to get to a yellow color and then reduce the hue. Looks about right. Okay, make another set of selections. Maybe that brick as well. Control U. This time we want a bit of a reddish color, and reduce the the saturation. I think that should do the trick. Right, so we've got one tower done. Maybe we can tweak the wood's hue and saturation as well. So I'm just going to select a few of these blanks. Control height, Control U. So Control H, Control U to tweak the hue saturation. Maybe we reduce the saturation for these. And maybe we have another color wood in here. Maybe we select that middle blank. Control H to hide, Control U for hue and saturation. This time, yeah, I like that yellow. Just reduce the saturation a tad, and we're good to go. That's how you quickly create variation. Although it's a mundane pattern, you can create a lot of variation just by tweaking the hue, saturation, and intensity, or the value, light and dark, of elements of that repeated pattern. And it will never look like a single brick that you started off with. It will create that variation that you so desperately after. Right, so now that we've got that, we can merge this. Let's merge that into one single layer. That as well. And now we can call that round tower. Okay, now if you duplicate that, Control J, move it over. Oh, and here. Remember to deselect, Control D, Control J to duplicate, V to move it over. Right, and then Control T on the keyboard, right click, flip horizontal, and you've got a new tower in there. So totally different. It's not the same tower. Listen, it's not the same tower. Are we clear? Right, great stuff. Now let's continue. Now that you've got that tower selected, or you've got that tower, so Control click that icon, create a new solid fill color, make it slightly darker, maybe a brownish color. Say okay, set the blending mode to multiply, maybe make that slightly lighter, maybe a bit blue. Yeah, I think the blue will work. And you can Control A to select everything, make sure black is the background color, press delete on the keyboard, right click that again, and now with your brush tool, a big brush, you can start painting the shadow on that side. Now remember, this part of the tower is not facing, is hidden in shade, so you can make the lower part slightly darker. Set your brush to about 30 if it's a bit too harsh, and now you can do a bit of blending as well by just pressing X on the keyboard and pressing very lightly on your pen. Right, now that we've got that, use your lasso tool and select. So we want to control this individually. So I'm just going to make a selection of this. And press while you've got the layer mask. Let's call that tower shade. So while you've got this selected, we want to delete that part of the mask. Press delete, Control D to deselect, and with your lasso tool you can make a selection of the parts you want to cast in shadow now. So that, maybe that as well. Yeah, we can select that. Control H to hide brush. And what we want to do now is, if you've worked in 3D, you'll know about ambient occlusion. What ambient occlusion means is where the corners are, it always gets slightly darker in the corners, where less and less light can reach those areas. So we want to add a bit of ambient occlusion in the darker areas, and in some cases we want to make that whole part dark. So you can make that whole part dark. Right, so and now remember this part of the tower is not facing the sun, so let's select that. I'm going to make a selection of the whole interior bit there, just to explain something. Right, now think of it this way. On the outside, the highlight, if the light is coming from right to left, if the light's coming from right to left, we will have a shadow on the left hand side, highlight on the right hand side. But the inverse is going to be true for the inside of cylinders. So the shadow will be on the opposite side because that's hidden away from our light source. So that part is going to be slightly darker than the outside compared to the outside. So I'm going to press Ctrl D to deselect, and I want to make a bit of a shadow on this part of the tower, the deck of the tower. Right, so that's tower number 1. Let's do the same for tower number 2. Okay, so you'll see without the shadow, with the shade, without shade, with shade. I'm just going to duplicate that and put it on top of the other tower. Kind of select the layer mask, Ctrl A to select everything, X to make sure that black and white is swapped, and press delete. Right, and then Control click your tower, make your brush big, and start painting, making sure that white is the top layer to be able to add your shaded colors in there. Now, of course, we can also add highlights to this. So we're going to do the same, but now we're going to select a warmish light color. And then usually overlay works great, but I think we need to reduce the saturation of that just a little bit. And I think that should work. Let's call that highlight. Control A, delete, and Control click our tower. This time we are going to do the reverse. So highlight on this side, highlight on this side. Just make sure not to overdo it too much. Look at that side. You can see how much this adds to the whole scene and the tower if you add a highlight as well. Alright, so once you have done that, you can either put that into a group, or you can merge that together as a single layer, into a single layer. So let's call that round tower 01. So for now I'm going to keep it in groups. Maybe I want to change the shades and highlights. Maybe I need to change the tower's color. So I'm just going to keep it into a single group for now. Right, and that's basically it for this tutorial. And you can see that my colors are slightly different to the scene now, and that's why I want to be able to tweak this. So now I can add a hue saturation, maybe reduce the saturation, and you'll see we get closer to what's going on in the scene. Maybe a little bit more. Let's leave it at 0. So just desaturate it. Maybe we need to tweak the highlights and shadow a little bit. So bring that, make that a little bit more opaque. And so that it's not too contrasty to the background. So we set that to say 90%. Let's do the same for that one, 90%, and we can just bring this over here as well. Make sure that it's make sure that it is clipped to this layer. If you press Alt on your keyboard and hover your mouse between the layers, you'll see that clipping icon. If I clip it now, you'll see that it affects the whole scene, and I only want to let it affect the painted layer. So we need to make sure that it is clipped to that specific layer. Right, so that concludes it for this lesson, and we will continue building more parts for our castle. Right, see you in the next one.